Happy Saturday morning, folks. So, I thought really long and hard about this, and I'm going to open up a little bit of my history for you. So, when I was 17, my dad tried to arrange a marriage for me with an older man who had money. And I decided that I would prefer to marry for love. And so, because of that decision, my dad told me, when you turn 18, you can't stay here. You have to go out on your own and figure out what you're going to do. And because of that conversation with my dad, and it was meant in loving terms, I want to be very clear about that. It was meant in loving terms. He was trying to teach me that I needed to adult. So, in keeping with my family's history, I joined the armed forces and went into the United States Army. Not everything in the U.S. Army was great for me. I mean, I tend to be a little bit of a rebel, and I don't take orders very well. And the dog is just rolling around in the dirt. But some really traumatic things happened to me while I was in the service, and I ended up, before I got out, I ended up getting married to a man who I felt was safe. That ended up being untrue. And from that marriage, I had one child. Now, when I split from my ex, I had been so emotionally battered down and physically battered down that it, to this day, the physical aspect still is something which I have to live with, right? That I was not there for my son. Not the way that I should have been. And my family was constantly trying to get me to go back with my ex. And so that was a extremely difficult time for me. And it was during this time that I got involved with someone else and ended up having a daughter who, quite frankly, I almost aborted. And she knows that. And when she was approximately 6 months old, I found an ad in the paper, which at that time I was living in a small mobile home. Couldn't keep the heat on in the winter, so we would use the kitchen stove, which was a gas stove, and we would use that to heat up the living room and the kitchen. And I learned very quickly how to seal off areas of the home during the winter and how to turn off the water so I didn't have frozen pipes. And so in the winter, We basically heated water on the stove and took what we call a witch's bath. But during this time frame, I would take the opportunity. We had a guy that come through the trailer park, and I would take the opportunity to buy the day old newspaper and day old bread because it was fairly cheap, and I couldn't get child support for my son or my daughter from either of their fathers. The one, my daughter's dad, just had no money. He wasn't working. But my son's dad went off grid. So it was a number of years before we actually figured out where he was at. So I, of course, went and, I tried to get welfare. I was told, well, since you own this 1961 mobile home and you own your vehicle, you have too many assets, and oh, hey, here's $35 a month in food stamps. That's it. So it was during this time frame, that I was doing odd jobs here and there, uh, just to get by. And it was during this time frame that I went and I bought an old newspaper for 5 cents. It was a day old newspaper, paid 5 cents for it. And I opened up the newspaper, and someone had cut an ad out of the newspaper. And it was an ad for Swift Transportation. Become a truck driver. And I took the ad and I stuck it on the refrigerator, right? Like, I don't think that's for me. And that's where it sat for a couple weeks. And a couple weeks went by, and I called the number. I want you to understand that at the time, I was not eating but once every 2 days because I had to put food on the table for my son and my daughter. I was getting WIC, but not a lot, right? And mostly the most that I got from WIC was baby formula for my daughter. Now the reason, of course, you're going to ask me, why wasn't I breastfeeding? Well, during this time frame, I did not want my daughter ingesting the various drugs that I was taking at the time. So it wasn't an option for me. So one of the hardest things I did was actually call that number about that job. It was one of the hardest things I ever did. It was also the biggest blessing that I've ever had. Now, I want you to understand that they told me, oh, you're going to have to come up with $175 to go to the school, and your kids can't come with you while you're in school. You're going to have to find someone to watch them. These two stipulations were really difficult for me because my family couldn't really watch my children, right? I mean, my son was old enough that my mom and dad could watch him while I went to school, but my daughter was still a baby, and so she ended up going to stay with her dad. And I worked for 3 days straight. I want to make this very clear. This was not given to me. I worked for 3 days straight to get the money up to go to that school. And I had to wait for 45 days for all the drugs to get out of my system. Again, like I said, this was not an easy decision. And it would have been so easy for me at that time to take that $175 and go get my next high, right? Would have been so easy. But something held me back. I can say that here we are, 22 years later, and I own my home because I took that chance. Now, not all of it has been rosy since I made that phone call. I want to be very clear about that. I lost custody of both of my children because I was not there. And my son ended up going to go stay with my brother all the way across the country, where I was only just able to see him once a year. My daughter also, I lost contact with where my daughter was. The court awarded her aunt custody, and I didn't know where she was for about 3 months. So when I tell you that life is hard, and sometimes you don't see the blessing in front of you because you're so caught up in the day-to-day that you don't see it. I'm speaking from my history. I have lost friends. I have been ostracized by family. I basically lost my children because I could not raise my children. And I was in a truck, living in the truck. Because I couldn't afford a place. Because also while I was in school, my parents sold my house, my little mobile home, out from underneath of me. Because I needed to get my act together. They did it out of love, but it was very tough love. I'm telling you this because I think that the times that we're moving into are going to be extremely difficult. And it would be so easy for you to give up. Don't. It would have been so easy for me to give up. And I didn't. And I didn't through the grace of Yah. For those who don't know, Yah is Yahweh, Jehovah, creator of the universe. I'm blessed. I'm very blessed. I now have contact with my children. We have a very good relationship. But it has not been an easy road. I have had to learn to rely on myself to the point where, for me to ask for assistance or help in doing anything, I don't expect that help to come through, because it's never come through for me in the past. I have lost friends just because I was in a truck and in a different lifestyle than them. And so I couldn't make it to the Little League games. I couldn't make it to, oh, well, we're having this barbecue or we're doing this, you know. I'm 2,000 miles away. I'm not going to make it. Oh, you missed the wedding. Oh, well, I want you to understand that people will come and go in your life. Some will be blessings and some will be curses. But what you got to focus on is you. What are your dreams? Not somebody else's dream that they've given you. What's your dream? My dream was to own my house, which I do. My dream was to have a chicken coop, which I built by myself. It ain't perfect, but my life ain't perfect. Don't let someone else define who you are. You get one life. Be who you are. And if people can't accept who you are, that's their issue, not yours. And I don't mean this like, oh, well, I'm gay and that's who I am. Okay. I don't have a problem with that. That's between you and God to decide if that's right. You know, be who you are. Don't let someone else stifle your creativity. Each of us is unique. I have met thousands upon thousands of people, and every one of them is unique. That's what I have for you today. A little bit of my history, not all of it, but some of it. Because I felt like so many people are getting caught up in all the rhetoric and they're following other people's dreams instead of using their own brain and their own creativity and their own dreams that they have. Don't let anyone squash your dreams. It might take you, like me, 22 years to get your dream, but I got it. A lot of hard work. Nothing's easy. So that's what I had for you today. Bicycle.